Welcome to the Birth Squad, the podcast designed to empower birthing individuals with real insights from two Black female physicians. We're here to guide you through your health journey, one episode at a time. I'm Dr. Kamisha Thomas.
And I'm Dr. Ijama Bello. We are two OBGYNs and longtime best friends, and we're here to help navigate you through the world of reproductive health.
Real women, real stories, real experts, and the facts you need to know.
Tune in every other Sunday, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.
Ready to join the squad? Let's get into it. Please be advised that the topics discussed in this episode may be sensitive and could be triggering to those who have experienced a miscarriage or ectopic pregnancy. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Now let's dive into this week's episode.
Hello, everyone. We are here today with an amazing guest who is Anna Rivera-Towns. Welcome, Anna. And why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the squad?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, ladies. My name is Anna Towns, and I am from Southern California. I am here to share my story about a really dark journey that I went through in hopes that it can shed a little bit of light to anyone that's possibly going through the situation.
Well, Anna, thank you again, like Ijama said, for being on our podcast. We'd like to kind of dive right in and ask you if you could share your journey to motherhood.
Yes, I have two beautiful daughters, 10 and 6. I had two very simple pregnancies. I love being pregnant and very quick deliveries. I actually delivered both of them without any medication, which I thought was pretty amazing, but they literally came so fast. I didn't have a choice. Motherhood has been really awesome. I've actually been a stay-at-home mom for the last 7 years, which I'm super grateful for.
So, Anna, one of the reasons why we invited you on the podcast is to talk about, your third pregnancy. So I wanted to hear from you, what was your initial reaction when you found out you were pregnant?
Yes. So at first we were shocked. We were not planning on baby number 3. We thought we were done. We were perfectly fine to not be outnumbered. We would have this joke, like, my husband can take one, I'll take the other. It's super manageable. But funny enough, when I was pregnant with Jada, I had 2 separate ultrasounds that the physician told us that she was going to be a boy. And we actually went on the Price is Right on the baby shower edition and did a gender reveal that she was going to be a boy. And surprise, she was a girl. So when we found out we were pregnant, after the shock, wore off, we were like, well, maybe this is our boy. Maybe this boy's really making his way into the world. And, we were super excited. We actually found out we were pregnant on Father's Day. And so it was like a nice surprise for my husband.
So then how was it discovered that it wasn't necessarily a normal pregnancy, and specifically the concern for an ectopic? What was the symptoms you had that led you to seek treatment?
Yes. So the day before I took that pregnancy test, I actually had a very sharp abdominal pain. And for someone that doesn't even get menstrual cramps, that was a big red flag. And I think that was just my body telling me something wasn't right. The next day, that's when I decided to take a pregnancy test. I just wanted to kind of check that box off to make sure that that wasn't the case. But when we found out it was, then I quickly called my doctor to try to schedule an appointment to see what's going on. Of course, I couldn't get an appointment right away, but they referred me to an outside provider. And 4 days later, I was able to go in and get an ultrasound. And after the first try, they just couldn't find the baby. So we switched rooms, they switched equipment, and they still couldn't find at least anything in my uterus. They were like, this is alarming because you're obviously pregnant. And so I finally spoke to a nurse practitioner, and she was like, you need to go to the closest ER right now. And that was terrifying because, again, with having already been pregnant and not having any issues and everything just happened so natural, I didn't know what to think. I actually didn't know anything about ectopic pregnancies until that day, as I drove myself to the ER and started doing research.
So oftentimes when, a pregnancy or an ectopic pregnancy is diagnosed, there's suspicion because of maybe the HCG level. Do you remember what your HCG level was at that time and how many weeks you were supposed to be estimated?
Yes. So based on the information I got later, I was 7 weeks pregnant. So the HCG levels were already well in the 10th, 20,000s. And so, and the assumption was also that it was most likely because the baby didn't make its way to the uterus. So it was in the fallopian tube. That was just a general assumption. So very quickly they took me in and I had an emergency laparoscopic surgery. And yeah, they were going after the fallopian tube.
Okay, squad. Now let's talk about pain, because when your body is screaming at you like that, We really need to listen.
Exactly. Pain is your body's alarm system, and sharp, one sided pain, especially early in pregnancy, can be a major warning sign of an ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah, so think of your uterus like a hotel. It's built to stretch and accommodate a growing guest. But if the pregnancy implants outside of the uterus, like in a fallopian tube or somewhere else, that space is not made to expand. So the body starts sending distress signals in the form of sharp pain.
And let's be real, sometimes we brush off pain because we're busy or don't want to overreact. But if something takes your breath away or makes you stop in your tracks, that's your cue to call the doctor.
100%. So let's talk about when you're expecting to find a pregnancy on ultrasound, but it can't be found. That is also when the red flags start waving.
Right. If you've got a positive pregnancy test, but nothing shows up on ultrasound, we start thinking about three possibilities. Number one, it's just too early to see it. Number two, it's an ectopic pregnancy. Or number three, it's a non viable pregnancy or an abnormal pregnancy that's not going to survive.
That's right. And that's where HCG levels are key. This hormone, which is called the human chorionic gonadotropin, should be rising steadily in a normal pregnancy. If it's high and then there's no pregnancy seen on ultrasound in the uterus, that is a big clue that the embryo might have implanted somewhere where it shouldn't be.
Think of this like a missing package. You know it was sent via the positive pregnancy test, but it hasn't arrived at the correct address or your uterus. Now the doctor has to track it down before there's a major problem.
It's also important to know that every pregnancy is different, and that's why it's important to take new symptoms seriously, even if you've been pregnant before.
Exactly. Your body isn't copy and pasting your pregnancy. It's starting from scratch.
Yes, and in Anna's case, her HCG was really high, and normally when an HCG hits about 3,000, we should actually see something on ultrasound in the uterus.
Right. If the uterus is empty but the HCG is high, we know the pregnancy is somewhere else. And that's when doctors start making quick decisions.
Yes. So let's break it down to the SWOT. HCG is like an email notification. It tells you there's a pregnancy somewhere, but it doesn't tell you exactly where. When it keeps climbing, but nothing's showing up on ultrasound, it's like getting a shipping update for a package that is not at your house.
And that means we need to find it before it causes serious harm. Now let's get back to Anna to find out what happened next.
So how did they explain the options to you on kind of deciding what course of treatment to do? Sounds like ultimately you all decided to do laparoscopy, but did they talk to you about any other options?
I do remember the doctor mentioning that my levels were actually too high for us to do like a methotrexate treatment that evening. She says that usually could be an option if the levels are low enough and they can just send me home. But that was not the option here.
So, kind of walk us through the series of events that kind of transpired. You found out you were pregnant. They told you you're about 7 weeks. You know, they were like medical management versus surgical management, but because of your levels, we have to go straight to surgical management. Walk us through the series of events.
Right. So the rest of the day was just kind of, I still remember it like a movie because I went into surgery and I woke up and my nurse tells me everything went great. You should be going home tonight. She's like, we're just waiting for a bed so you can, the anesthesia can wear out and you can be okay to go home. And I was like, okay. And as I'm waiting there, my husband comes in and he looks so upset. And he's like, did they tell you? And I was like, tell me what? He's like, they weren't able to do anything. And so I'm looking at him with so much confusion because, nobody really knows what's going on. I guess the doctor's the only one that knows. And my husband doesn't know how to quite explain it. And I just didn't understand. Eventually, a couple hours go by and the doctor comes in and she's like, okay, so I went in, your fallopian tubes look fine. So I did a little bit of exploration. And as I'm looking, and then she's showing me pictures, she's like, the baby's located behind your cervical wall between your rectum and your cervix. Literally in the lowest part, it's called a cul-de-sac, where there's literally no space for it to grow. What's going to happen is going to rupture and you're going to die. And I mean, it felt like somebody just threw cold water at me. She's like, I couldn't do anything. I had to get out. She's like, I didn't have the support. I call a couple of my counterparts and they're like, you need to get out. And that was it. She didn't know what else to do. She was calling a few other people and I was just kind of left hanging for a couple of hours while they kind of figured it out. There's so much fear when you're a patient and your doctor does not know what to do. That was probably really scary because at this point, I'm also trying to, deal with the idea that this baby that we were so excited for, like, it's not going to make it. There's just absolutely no way. And now I'm a ticking bomb. So we're just trying to, ride through the wave and be as, I guess, as patient and hopeful as we can.
Wow. Okay. Hold up right there. So this wasn't even a regular ectopic pregnancy. This was an abdominal ectopic, which is super, super rare. More specifically, hers was actually in the posterior cul-de-sac or behind the uterus.
Yes, which is crazy. Normally, ectopic pregnancies happen in the fallopian tube. That's where the fertilized egg usually gets stuck. But in Anna's case, the pregnancy implanted way outside the normal area, deep in her abdomen.
And this is like trying to grow a plant in concrete. It does not have the right environment to survive. And worse, it's actually a dangerous location where it can cause massive internal bleeding.
This is why the doctor was so blunt. If it ruptured, it could have been fatal. And that's why fast treatment is critical.
Yes, an ectopic pregnancy is not just a pregnancy that went wrong, it's a medical emergency. The way an ectopic pregnancy develops means that without treatment, the mother's life is at serious risk. It's not a matter of if it will rupture, it's when.
So, as we listen to Anna's story, we really want people to understand that ectopic pregnancies aren't just an unfortunate loss. They're situations where timely medical intervention literally saves lives. Now, let's get back to Anna.
So you're out of surgery. They tell you that the pregnancy is now, instead of being in the tube like they expected, is in the back and they don't know what to do. So kind of what happened next?
Yes, finally, I get admitted into the hospital, and a couple of the doctors come and they start talking options. And the one that they thought of was like, okay, we usually do this methotrexate on people with really low HCG levels, but what we can do is essentially we can pump you up with a higher dose, and we can just continue that until your HCG levels drop. But at that point, I was with a hospital that was not within my network, so they're like, we're going to transfer you to your network essentially, and they're more equipped, they have more resources, they should be able to essentially make a different decision if they wish to. So that evening I was supposed to get my very first dose of the methotrexate medication. And that in itself was, I feel, not a challenge for me necessarily, but it just felt like another hurdle that I had to work through. A nurse came in and said, you know what, our chemotherapy nurse on staff right now does not feel comfortable giving you your methotrexate dose. And I didn't understand. Honestly, it didn't even hit me. And I remember thinking, oh, she must be busy. I didn't understand until they told me that the second nurse that had come in also didn't feel comfortable giving me my medication essentially. And they told me it's because of her beliefs. She's Christian, she doesn't feel comfortable. And I was very confused because I had no other option. I didn't understand how that could even be an option. Eventually, later in the early morning, another nurse came and she gave me my medication. But even then, she asked me many, many times, are you sure this is what you want to do? Are you sure this is? And I just remember just crying because I felt so much shame and guilt in receiving this treatment that, again, I felt like I had no other choice. And I just remember calling my husband. He was so upset and he couldn't be there because he still had a lot of COVID protocols and he couldn't be there, essentially to support or advocate for me. It was very difficult. Again, you're going through so much emotional turmoil and then this happens. It's just like an added factor.
Woo! Let's sit on that one for a second because Anna brought up something that is huge. And we want to be clear and make this point. Treating an ectopic pregnancy is not an abortion. It is life-saving treatment.
Absolutely, Jama. This is a pregnancy that cannot survive. And if left untreated, it can be deadly for the mother.
Exactly. And in some states, restrictions on reproductive health care have gotten so strict that even doctors now are hesitant or even afraid to act, even in emergencies like this.
So imagine a patient comes into the ER, clearly in danger, and the doctors are second guessing what they're legally allowed to do. That's where we are in some places right now, and it's terrifying.
And let's talk about delays, because in cases like Anna's, time is everything. The longer a doctor waits to intervene, the higher the risk of rupture and internal bleeding. So this is why we need clear, science-based policies that put patient safety first.
Absolutely. The bottom line, if you have an ectopic pregnancy, you need treatment. And you should never be made to feel ashamed for seeking care that's literally saving your life.
And as we see in Anna's situation, the medical staff were hesitant to administer the treatment she needed called methotrexate.
And that hesitation, that delay, that guilt placed on the patient, it's dangerous. And it's something we as doctors have to push against to ensure women get the care they deserve.
Right. Now let's get back to Anna.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it is our job as providers to convey that information and to make sure the staff involved understand that, because as a patient, you should never be made to feel the way you felt. And I just want to apologize to you too, because that is so unfair.
Yeah. And what I soon realized too is that I just happen to be very lucky to live in a state that has laws that can allow doctors to treat women, and, had I been in a different state, what would have happened to me? Would I had to flee the state to try to get the care that I needed because my life was at risk? It's just mind blowing. I felt so fortunate.
So then take us through what happened after that. You finally got the methotrexate, thankfully. Then what happened?
Yeah, I was transferred to a different hospital, and same. Every doctor that I encountered had never seen this. One of the doctors was like, "I've read about this, but I have never had a patient with this case or anywhere near." And there were just so many questions that I had that couldn't be answered. Like, why? Why did this happen? How does it even happen? It's just so wild to think that, a process didn't quite work and it did the opposite. Like instead of going this way, it went that way. And it's just so wild. And, essentially what they say, we don't know. We honestly don't know. So essentially they prepped me to a potential surgery. But in the meantime, I continued the methotrexate treatment, and I was in the hospital for 8 days. I do remember on one of those occasions, there was like a miscommunication where one of the surgeons did want to do surgery. They prepped me for surgery. I literally went to the OR, and at the last minute, they're like, okay, we're not doing surgery. We're just going to continue the methotrexate. So again, it was just so confusing. And when I tell you I was in a roller coaster, I really was. And the uncertainty as I'm waiting for these levels to drop, anything could happen. And I just remember being at the hospital and like writing letters to my daughters because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to go home. And I think that was the hardest part, making a decision beyond me. It was for the kids that I had to go home and take care of. So, it was just, waiting and having faith that it was all going to work out.
So Anna brought up a really good question. Why does an ectopic pregnancy happen? And the truth is, even with all of our medical knowledge, we don't always have a clear answer.
Right, but most ectopic pregnancies happen because the fertilized egg gets stuck, usually in the fallopian tube, before it reaches the uterus. But in Anna's case, it implanted in her abdomen, which is incredibly rare.
Yes, and while risk factors like previous pelvic infection, endometriosis, cigarette smoking, or past surgeries can sometimes increase the chance of getting an ectopic pregnancy, many women who have none of these risk factors may also get an ectopic pregnancy.
Which is why this isn't something you can predict or prevent in most cases. It's like a GPS glitch. Your body was trying to send the pregnancy to the uterus, but somehow it ended up in the wrong location.
And can we talk about those 8 grueling days that Anna spent in the hospital, not knowing what would happen next? That's like an eternity when your life is hanging in the balance.
And let's talk about why they kept switching between surgery and methotrexate. Because I know some of y'all listening are wondering, why not just take it out?
Exactly. So when doctors diagnose an ectopic pregnancy, we usually have 2 treatment options. One is methotrexate, which is a medication that stops the pregnancy from growing so that the body can absorb it safely. And number 2, surgery, either removing the pregnancy or in tubal cases, just removing the whole affected tube.
So let's break down methotrexate real quick. Anna was given methotrexate, which is a medication that helps stop the pregnancy from growing so that the body can absorb it safely, like Ijama said.
Right. And this is usually an option only if the ectopic pregnancy has not ruptured yet and the HCG levels are not too high.
Think of it like stopping a runway train before it crashes. If doctors catch an ectopic pregnancy early enough, methotrexate can help the body resolve it without surgery.
And in Anna's case, because the pregnancy was so deep in her abdomen, surgery was super risky. They didn't want to go in unless they absolutely had to, because that could have led to severe bleeding or complications.
Right. So they were playing this delicate game of wait and see, hoping the methotrexate would work, but ready to rush into surgery if things took a turn.
And emotionally, That is so brutal because every day you're waiting, hoping, wondering if today's the day your body will start healing and move on, or the day that you may need emergency surgery. So my heart goes out to Anna. Let's get back to her story. Again, Anna, I'm so sorry that you went through this. Um, it's an emotional roller coaster, just as you described. So I wanted to ask you, just to get a little bit more detail, what was your follow-up like?
Yeah, my the levels went all the way up to 48,000. At the beginning of the treatment, they continued to increase, so I think that's where the fear really kicked in. That it just wasn't going to work, and but eventually they did begin to drop, and I want to say it was around day 5 or 6 of my hospital stay. Yeah, it was until the 8th day that they confirmed that the AGC levels were below the 10,000s, and they felt comfortable sending me home. I did continue lab work after that. There were also other tests other levels that they were checking for. So I was getting tests for like my liver levels to make sure that I was, essentially healthy enough. And yeah, and any side effects that could happen because of the treatment. But yeah, I feel like once all of that wore off and I was able to essentially be more active, because something about the treatment, it just made me so tired. I just remember coming home and I was exhausted for at least a couple of weeks. I was just bedridden, but it was just nice to be home with my family and know that the treatment was working as long as it took, and that essentially we were out of the dark.
That's a very, very difficult situation to be in. So how did you navigate that while caring for your two other children, right? That's so difficult. Can you share with us how that was?
Honestly, I feel like that was a very pivotal moment in my marriage where I just felt like I could 100% count on this person. When I tell you this man just stepped right in and was brushing hair and brushing teeth and, just doing all the things while still managing to visit me. That means everything. I think to a woman, to know that you can have someone I feel like I've always been the caretaker. I take care of the babies and I take care of him and I just do everything. That was the one time where I 100% needed him at his 120%. And that was like a real test to our marriage. And if anything, I felt like it brought us together, like it bonded us, and it solidified our partnership. And yeah, without him, I don't know what I would have been able to do. I was so thankful that he was there for me the way he was.
Listen, let's take a moment to appreciate all the partners who show up, because so many times women are expected to just push through these medical experiences by themselves.
And that's why support systems, whether it's your partner, family, or friends, are critical. When you're physically and emotionally drained, you need people who can take care of the things you can't.
So, to all the partners out there, please take notes. When your person is going through something like this, be present and be proactive.
Now let's talk about the symptoms Anna was feeling. What a lot of people don't realize is that methotrexate is a chemotherapy drug. So Anna wasn't just getting pregnancy treatment. Her body was literally going through chemo.
Yes, so it works by stopping fast growing cells, which is good for cancer treatment, right? And also for stopping ectopic pregnancies. But on the downside, it also affects your immune system, your energy, and even your digestive system.
That's why doctors monitor your liver function, kidney function, and blood counts when giving methotrexate, because it's not a light treatment, it's serious medication.
And Anna got multi dose therapy because her HCG levels were so high. So it was even harder on her body. That's why she felt so drained. And it wasn't just the emotional exhaustion, it was her body physically recovering from this intense medical process. So let's get back to the rest of her story. So, Anna, you're now on the other side of this experience. I'm so grateful that, you survived. Literally, this was a life threatening condition. So, looking back, are there any misconceptions that you had about ectopic pregnancy before your experience, and how has your perspective changed?
Yes, it sounds very normal just to say, "Oh, I have an ectopic pregnancy," but to learn how quickly you can go from being diagnosed and for it to be life-threatening is just so fast. And the way your body just, essentially hemorrhages itself. It's really terrifying. And I didn't understand the seriousness until that nurse practitioner said, "You need to go now." I was just kind of like, what is the rush? I feel fine. But you can go from feeling fine to, just losing your breath within hours. So yes, and again, I also didn't have a lot of information about what an ectopic pregnancy was until this happened. And I just feel like education is so important, just learning about this and what to do if you do find out that you have an ectopic pregnancy. But I think most importantly is listening to your body. If I wouldn't have listened to my body and understood that something wasn't right, I probably wouldn't have been so urged to get an ultrasound as quickly as I did. I probably would have waited for that one appointment that I had for like the following month, and that would have been catastrophic. So listen to your body. I think that is the most important thing that I took away from this.
In addition to that, is there anything else that you would want other women to know about ectopic pregnancies that they might not hear from their healthcare providers?
I mean, again, I didn't know a whole lot about this, but of course, understanding how severe it is and advocating for yourself. Don't let anybody make you feel like you're doing something wrong, because this is your life and this is your family at risk. You can't let others determine how you're going to feel about the process or how to treat yourself. It's so important that you, again, do your research, understand what your options are, and continue to advocate for that. Again, I wish I would have had someone by my side to help me through the process. And eventually, Ijeoma came, and I don't think I got to tell you how thankful I was. You gave us so much peace just to know that, we have this incredible, super intelligent human checking up on me and, advocating for me and making sure that I was getting the treatment along with, I remember there was another medication. You were like, you make sure you tell them to give you this every other day with your treatment. Um, and I am just so thankful for you.
Anna hit on something so important: how deceptive an ectopic pregnancy can be.
Yes, because in the early stages, you may not be feeling anything unusual. Or if you do, it might just be like mild cramping or light spotting, things that could happen in a normal pregnancy.
But then, boom, the pregnancy ruptures, and suddenly it's a medical emergency. That's why we never take sharp abdominal pain or abdominal bleeding lightly in early pregnancy.
And that's why timing is everything. If you wait too long, the chances of survival do go down.
So, to everyone listening, if you're pregnant and have sudden, sharp pain, especially on one side, do not wait it out. Call your doctor or go to the emergency room. It could literally save your life.
Anna also spoke about why advocacy is non-negotiable when it comes to pregnancy care.
Because the sad reality is, women, especially Black women, are more likely to have their pain dismissed or their symptoms downplayed.
And that's why knowing how to speak up for yourself is a life-saving skill. If something goes wrong and your doctor is not listening to you, find someone who will.
Jama, I love that you were there for her, because let's be honest, sometimes you need a medical translator in these moments. Someone who can say, nope, we need to push for this test, or make sure you're getting this medication.
Exactly. And if you don't have a doctor friend or to text, bring someone with you to your appointments to be your advocate, whether it be a partner, a sister, a friend, someone who will ask the hard questions and make sure that you're getting the care that you need. Let's hear the rest of Anna's story. And I'm just so thankful that I was able to use my experience to help you. And honestly, that's why we do what we do, right? It's to prevent these serious morbidity and mortality outcomes that could happen. And knowledge is power. That's exactly why we're doing the Birth Squad. You just have to have more knowledge about it. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing this story, because one, it was physically traumatic. Second, it was emotionally traumatic. You were tested medically with your body. And then also you are experiencing grief too, right? From that lost pregnancy. So I just really want to thank you for being here and being so open. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about your journey or any lessons that you learned?
It was such a tested time for me. I feel like after that journey, I just felt like, okay, I have a second chance at life, because I was terrified that that would have been it. And if anything I can take from that situation, it's my appreciation for my family or my appreciation for life. I feel like we got a second shot at living. And my husband says it all the time. It's like, we're gonna do fun things moving forward. We're gonna just have adventures. We're gonna live our life, because you don't know when it's your time. Just I am so grateful to have this opportunity again to live, and just to have fun with my family and, make the most of life.
We want to thank Anna so much for sharing her story. Today, you can actually catch her on the current season of The Amazing Race with her husband, Jonathan. And if you're listening in April of 2025, this is the 37th season of The Amazing Race. She got her second chance to be living life to the fullest with her husband. Her experience will help so many other women recognize the signs, speak up for themselves, and get the care that they need.
And to our birth squad, your health, your safety, and your life matter. So trust yourself, listen to your body, and never be afraid to advocate for what you need.
That's the wrap of this episode of The Birth Squad.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We are going to continue sharing stories from more badass birth warriors, because at the end of the day, you are the experts of your experience, and we want to highlight you and your bold, brave, and beautiful journey to motherhood.
And we want to hear from you. Tell us about what topics you'd like to hear more about. Hit us up on Instagram at The Birth Squad, and check out our website, thebirthsquad.com.
Most importantly, be sure to share this episode with your squad.
Until next time, I'm Dr. Ijama Ogwandu.
And I'm Dr. Kamisha Thomas.
Peace, love, and solidarity from the Birth Squad.